in the country, a Brexit deal that would benefit Britain and allow us to rebuild our communities, regions and our economy and avoid any hard border in Northern Ireland. But that isn't her deal. And as we reach a critical point in this nation's history, we need a Prime Minister who will for once make the right decision and put the country before her party and stand up to the reckless voices on her backbenches and within her cabinet. For too long, this country has been held hostage to those in her party who want to drive through a race-to-the-bottom Brexit deal that lowers rights and standards, sells off our national assets to the lowest bidder. Mr. Speaker, it is clear.
Order, Mr. Heapy. You're normally such a good-natured and laid-back fellow. I don't know what's happened to you. I don't know what you had for breakfast, but tip me off afterwards and I'll make sure to avoid it. We need an atmosphere of calm. Nobody, questioner or anybody answering, namely the Prime Minister, nobody in this chamber will be shouted down. And that's the end of it. It's as simple as that. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is clear that the Prime Minister's failure to stand up to the warring factions of her own side have led to this impasse. Let me remind the Prime Minister and her benches what they signed up to just 10 months ago. And I quote, "In the absence of agreed solutions, the United Kingdom will maintain full alignment with those rules of the internal market and the customs union, which now or in the future support North-South cooperation, the all-island economy and the protection of the 1998 agreement." Does that still stand? Interesting question for the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what she is now hoping is that she can cobble together a deal that avoids all the big questions as to what our future partnership with the European Union will be. Isn't it the case that the backstop is only necessary because the government won't agree to a new comprehensive customs union with the EU with a say for Britain in future trade deals? And Mr. Speaker, how long is her envisaged temporary deal? 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? More? Britain deserves a bit better than this. The blindfold Brexit they're cooking up is a bridge to nowhere and a dangerous leap in the dark. Let me be clear, the only thing we can trust this government to do is impose more years of austerity on the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister wants to present Brexit as a choice between her deal and no deal. This is simply not the case. There is an alternative option, an alternative that can command the support of Parliament and the country. Labour has set out our 6 tests. At times, the Prime Minister said she would meet them. Labour's plan, Mr. Speaker, is for Britain and the EU...
Order! I mean, an even better-natured fellow, the Honourable Gentleman for Colchester, normally the embodiment of charm and good grace, very over-excitable. We'll get you in due course, Mr. Quince, don't worry. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Labour's plan is for Britain and the EU to negotiate a permanent customs union to protect jobs and manufacturing. We want a deal that allows us to strengthen rights and working standards so we can avoid a race to the bottom. And we want a deal for all regions and nations and allows us to invest in local infrastructure, local transport and energy markets so we can grow our economy again. Labour will not give the government a blank cheque to go down the reckless path they're set on at the present time. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, the choice for this Parliament should never be her deal or no deal. If this government cannot get a good deal for this country, then it has to make way for those who can. The Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, faces a simple and inescapable choice. Be buffeted this way and that way by the chaos of her own party, or back a deal that can win the support of Parliament and the people of this country.
Prime Minister!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps I could point a few things out to the right honourable gentleman. First of all, he said that the discussion on the backstop was in order to avoid the questions of the future relationship. If he had actually listened to my statement, which in fact he had received an early copy of, he would have seen that I made clear that actually we have made good progress on both the structure and scope of the future relationship, which we've been discussing alongside the withdrawal agreement. He also talks about there being a better deal available. Well, we never hear from the Labour Party exactly what deal it is that they think they want. What we have seen...
Order! Far too much noise. I said a moment ago the Leader of the Opposition must be heard. The Prime Minister must be heard. Prime Minister.
What we have heard from the Labour Party is that at one point they say they want to do really good trade deals around the rest of the world. The next moment they want to tie us into the Brussels trade deals by being part of the customs union. One minute they say they want to respect the vote of the British people in relation to free movement. The next minute they say, well, actually, no, free movement is still on the table. So what we see from the Labour Party is constantly no firm proposals on this particular issue. They also talk about being in a customs union, and can I say to the right honourable gentleman, this is perhaps the sort of detail he may not have recognised, but even if you were to go down the route of the sort of deal that might involve being in a customs union, it would still be necessary to have a backstop in case there was a delay between bringing that in and the end of the implementation period. And certainly on this side of the House, we're very clear about our commitments to the people of Northern Ireland and our commitments to the United Kingdom. And then he said, what have we got to show for all of this that has been undertaken? What we have got to show for it is the vast majority of the withdrawal agreement agreed and significant progress and agreement on the structure and scope of the future relationship. And what we also have to show for it is a government that is determined to deliver on the vote of the British people, unlike an opposition that wants to frustrate the people's vote and frustrate Brexit.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can I urge my right honourable friend not to listen to the groundhog opposite who doesn't have any interesting questions, but to rely on one specific question of all, which is, I agree with my right honourable friend that we are not and will not be in the customs union, that is a pledge that she made and which the British people voted for, to be out of the customs union. But the question I ask her is, when she made her decision on that, how long does she think that this temporary arrangement might last? And most importantly, who would make the final decision as to when it ends?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that in relation to the UK-wide customs arrangement, we set out when we published our proposals in June that we would expect that to end by December 2021. But I also say to my right honourable friend, he asked me what I want to see and what I think in relation to this arrangement. I don't want to see the backstop having to be used at all. What I want is to ensure that we deliver for the people of Northern Ireland through the future relationship, and that future relationship comes into place on the 1st of January 2021 when the implementation period ends, so that we don't have to see this backstop arrangement being used at all.
Mr. Peter Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for the advance sight of her speech. Can I first of all apologise on behalf of my right honourable friend from Rossguy and Lochaber, who, as often is the way, coming from a remote location, has been delayed in transit. Mr. Speaker, this morning Scotland's First Minister launched Scotland's Place in Europe, Our Way Forward, the latest in a series of analysis on the ongoing negotiations, setting out the best possible, or at least the least worst possible future for Scotland. The first of these Scottish Government analysis papers came 18 months before Chequers, and to date hasn't led to a single resignation from the Scottish Cabinet. The sense of unity and responsibility being demonstrated by the Government in Edinburgh could hardly be in a more marked contrast to what we see from the UK Government here today. Last night, the negotiations collapsed again. Did the Secretary of State go dashing off to Brussels just to fail? Or did he go because his officials had told him that a deal was close? And if that is the case, surely this House is entitled to know what it was that yet again went wrong at the last minute. Because the Government's official explanations only make sense if the Prime Minister has decided that the proposal she signed up to last December is unworkable. Mr. Speaker, the reality of all of this weighs heavily across communities, particularly in the island of Ireland. We're 3 days away from the EU Council Summit, and the Government still continues to show at best disdain and at worst open contempt for the people of Ireland and for the Good Friday Agreement. They clearly have no real understanding of what communities on both sides of the border are feeling about these negotiations. As long ago as last December, the Brexit Select Committee, despite an over-representation of hardliners, made it clear that we could not see how it's possible to reconcile there being no border with the Government's policy of leaving the single market.
Order, I'm trying to hear the honourable gentleman. Let's hear the fella. Mr. Peter... I know, very much noise. Mr. Malcolm MacDonald, Stuart Malcolm MacDonald is pointing out there's a lot of noise. I'm well aware of that fact. He doesn't need to conduct the orchestra. Peter Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having seen how our backbenchers have responded to her appeal for cool, calm heads, you can understand why she struggles to keep her party together when there's hard questions to be answered. And Mr. Speaker, it was striking, the contrast in reaction from the Tory backbenchers when the Prime Minister committed to defending the Good Friday Agreement, and there was at best a lukewarm response, and there was then 3 hearty cheers when she said we're taking Northern Ireland out of the Customs Union. It tells us where the Tory party's priorities are. A Conservative party playing politics with people's lives for the sake of its own political survival is nothing short of disgraceful. And there is a better way, Mr. Speaker. It's time for the Prime Minister to disown the extreme hardline minority in her own party. The Prime Minister has the chance to resolve the question of the Irish border, to protect jobs, to prevent the economic catastrophe we face, and to respect the result of the referendum in 2016. So will she now accept that she got it wrong? Will the Prime Minister now commit to a damage limitation Brexit? Accept that there is a significant consensus in this House in favour of remaining in the single market and the customs union? Can I say to the Prime Minister, ignore your own career prospects, ignore the career ambitions of those behind her, look instead at the hundreds of thousands of people whose jobs are at risk if this goes wrong? Will she take her head out of the sand and work with those on all benches in this House to ensure that the United Kingdom stays in the single market and in the customs union?
Mr. Speaker, I'll pick up a number of those points. It interests me that the honourable gentleman was talking about the importance to him of staying in the single market, presumably because of his concern about trade with the European Union. Well, we want to have a good trade deal with the European Union, but we also want to be free to be able to negotiate our own trade deals around the rest of the world as well. He said that he referenced the question, or he questioned what it was that were still the areas of disagreement between us and the European Union in relation to the withdrawal agreement, and I set those out in my statement. I'm afraid, he used a very unfortunate term. He said that we were showing contempt for the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland. Far from that. It is precisely because we recognise our commitment to the people of Northern Ireland that we are working hard to ensure that we deliver no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and we ensure that people and businesses in Northern Ireland are able to carry on their day-to-day lives and their business as they can do today. He also started off by referencing a piece of work that talked about the best economic future for Scotland. I hate to have to remind the SNP yet again, but the best economic future for Scotland is to remain in the United Kingdom.
Mr. Boris Johnson.
I know that my right honourable friend will appreciate that in deciding to remain in the customs union, the Leader of the Opposition is guilty of a shameless U-turn and a betrayal of millions of people who voted yes. Will she know?
Order! I want to hear thee! Order! I want to hear the right honourable gentleman. Order! I want to hear the right honourable gentleman member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Let's hear the fella. Boris Johnson.
In that case, Mr. Speaker, I will repeat that the right honourable gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, is guilty of a shameless U-turn and a betrayal of millions of people who voted Leave. And will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, confirm, as I think she has just said, that the very latest deadline by which this country will take back control of our tariff schedules in Geneva and vary those tariffs independently of Brussels in order to do free trade deals will be, as I think she has just said, December 2021. If that isn't the deadline, then could you say what it is?
First of all, can I say to my right honourable friend, he's absolutely right in pointing out the U-turn of the Leader of the Opposition. As I referenced in my response to the Leader of the Opposition, they cannot hold the position both that they want to do trade deals around the rest of the world and also that they want to be part of a customs union. In relation to the, as I said, when we published the temporary customs arrangement proposal back in June, we set that point of the expectation that that would be completed by December 2021. One of the issues, as I indicated in my statement, that we're discussing with the European Union is how we can ensure that we do reflect the temporary nature of the backstop and properly reflect the temporary nature of the backstop. I continue to believe that what we should all be doing is working to ensure that the backstop never comes into place and that actually it's not December 2021 that we're talking about, but it's the 1st of January 2021.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. In the paper that was published on the 7th of June proposing a way of keeping an open border in Northern Ireland, the government said that its temporary customs arrangement would be in place, and I quote, until the future customs arrangement can be introduced. The Prime Minister has just reminded the House that she expects those arrangements to be in place by December 2021 at the latest, which incidentally is a whole year after the end of the proposed transition period. But since the expectation of an end date is not the same as a definite end date, when is she going to tell her party that we cannot have a fixed artificial time limit on that fallback which the government is trying to negotiate with the EU?
Can I say, as I have done in relation to a number of questions already on this particular point, we are very clear. Let's just look at what the purpose of the backstop is. The purpose of the backstop is to be an insurance policy such that if the future relationship is not in place, then at the time of the 1st of January 2021, then there is an arrangement that ensures no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. So it is there for the time until the future relationship can come into place. As we indicated in June, we expect that to be no later than December 2021, but we will be working to ensure that that point comes as early as possible, because actually it's in everybody's interests. It's in everybody's interest to ensure that we are able to move seamlessly after the implementation period into the future relationship without actually having to enter into another sort of relationship in the interim period. That's what the backstop would be. That's why we want to work to ensure that the backstop never has to come into place.
Amber Rudd.
Mr. Speaker, this is a moment of great importance, which is why the Chamber is so full of members of Parliament here to speak on behalf of their communities and the relevance of this particular discussion on behalf of their businesses as well. Can I urge the Prime Minister that when she listens to the very many different voices in this House she is blessed to hear from, she makes sure that she responds and works on those compromises with the EU, not just on behalf of the 52%, but also on behalf of the 48%. It is on behalf of the 100% that we need to deliver on leaving the European Union.
Well, can I I say and give my right honourable friend the assurance that what I and the government are looking for is a deal for the future relationship with the European Union which is good for the whole of the United Kingdom, which reflects the interests of the whole of the United Kingdom, and which ensures that we do have that freedom to do trade deals around the rest of the world, but also that we protect the jobs and livelihoods that today depend on the relationship and the trading relationship with the EU. So what we're looking for, what I'm looking for, and I'm sure my right honourable friend and other right honourable and honourable friends are looking for, is a deal that is good for the whole of the United Kingdom.
Sir Vincent Cable.
Could I ask the Prime Minister why she really felt it necessary to make this statement today? Because it doesn't advance one iota our understanding that in relation to Ireland, Brexit means borders and bureaucracy and ultimately betrayal of the Good Friday Agreement.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that he frequently stands in this House and complains about lack of government coming to talk to the House of Commons and inform them. And now today I come and inform the House of Commons on the position and he complains about that already. That's typical Liberal Democrat. They don't know where they stand on the issue.
Sir William Cash.
Will my right honourable friend confirm that if we go 1 second beyond the 31st of December 2020, we will automatically fall into the multi-annual surveillance framework, and therefore we will be accumulating tens of billions of pounds extra year on year? Does my right honourable friend accept that? And does she also accept that if we continue to be dictated to by the EU in the way things are going at the moment, this country will be brought to a humiliating conclusion?
Can I say to my honourable friend, and obviously he is one of my honourable friends who has paid particular attention to these issues and very careful attention to these issues, but I don't agree with the situation that he has set out. We have been negotiating with the European Union. That has seen both the European Union recognising the arguments that we have been put forward and moving their position in relation to those, some of those issues, and us obviously recognising our need to put forward proposals that are both acceptable to us but recognise the concerns that have been expressed by the European Union. But what we are doing, and what I'm doing, is making sure that any deal that we have is the deal that is best for the future of the United Kingdom. That's a deal that delivers on the Brexit vote, but does so in a way which protects jobs and livelihoods. Now, what we're doing in relation to the future relationship is I want to ensure that that future relationship can start at the end of the implementation period, in which case, of course, there would be no question of a different relationship with the European Union for any period of time. The financial settlement we have agreed as part of the withdrawal agreement, as my honourable friend knows, but I remind the House yet again that, and this was a phrase I think first used by the EU themselves, that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed.
Beck Cooper.
The Prime Minister will know that there is a real fear that the government will delay pinning down any deal until the last possible minute so that it can try and bounce Parliament with the threat that it is her deal or no deal. She knows that that would be unacceptable to Parliament, but she also knows how damaging no deal would be in terms of security as well as jobs and the economy. So will she confirm that it would be better to apply for an extension to Article 50 than to crash out with no deal?
No, can I say to the right honourable lady that I do not believe that we should be extending Article 50. I've been very clear that we should not be extending Article 50, and I'm a little bemused by her first suggestion. We have legislated for a process here in Parliament that ensures that there will be not just the deliberations that this House will rightfully have on the withdrawal agreement and implementation bill, but there will be a meaningful vote in this House prior to that. Honourable members on the Labour benches say when. Of course, we're still in negotiations with the European Union in terms of delivering on the deal, and we continue to work to the timetable that has recently been set out.
Anna Soubry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that this is not what Leave voters voted for? Leave voters and businesses in Broxtowe were promised a deal on trade, not after we've left the European Union, but at the time that we leave the European Union. They were told it would be the easiest deal in the history of trade deals. They were told it would convey the exact same benefits as our membership of the single market and the customs union. What we now see is complete chaos and a total mess. Would the Prime Minister consider that if her government can't get a grip on this, if Parliament can't get a grip on this, then it's time to face up to the fact that Brexit cannot be delivered, take it back to the people and have a people's vote?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that, as I have consistently said on this issue, this Parliament voted overwhelmingly to give the choice to the British people as to whether to leave or remain in the European Union. The people voted to leave the European Union, and I believe it is a matter of faith in our democracy, of the integrity of politicians, that we deliver for people on that vote. And I also say to my right honourable friend that that's why I think it is so important that we recognise there is talk of a people's vote going back to people for a vote. The people were given a vote. The people's vote happened in 2016 and the people voted to leave.
Mr. Nigel Dodds.
Border on the island of Ireland, which nobody wants. It can never be right that we have any kind of borders in the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. She knows that we cannot support any deal that creates a border of any kind in the Irish Sea. Not my words, the words of Ruth Davidson, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives. Will she confirm today, as she has said in her statement, that a proposed backstop that would see Northern Ireland carved off in the EU customs union and parts of the single market separated through a border in the Irish Sea from the UK's own internal market could never be accepted by her? She has said that today. Will she confirm its single market and customs union, the UK leaving the EU together with no part hived off either in the single market or customs union differences?
When the UK leaves the when the UK leaves the European Union, it will be the UK that leaves the European Union. We will be leaving the European Union together. I'm very clear there should be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, but as we've put forward proposals, we can deliver on that and maintain the integrity of our union. And of course, what we're looking at in relation to the, and we made that very clear when the European Union made their proposal that would effectively have carved Northern Ireland away from the rest of the United Kingdom in their backstop proposal. It's precisely because we cannot accept their backstop to a backstop because they continue to want to see that. In fact, what we want to see in a backstop is a situation where Northern Ireland businesses can both export freely to Great Britain and to the European Union. Actually, that would be a good position for the Northern Ireland businesses.
John Redwood.
Trying to sign a withdrawal agreement without having legally binding text on the future partnership would leave the UK in a deeply vulnerable position and unable to negotiate properly. So will she confirm today that in her view no deal is still a lot better than a bad deal, and a bad deal is giving £39 billion away that we need to spend on our priorities for no good reason?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I do still believe that no deal is better than a bad deal. I am still working for what I believe is the best outcome for the UK, which is a good negotiated deal with the European Union for the future. But of course, we continue with our no deal preparations. We have, of course, indicated in relation to the financial settlement, as my right honourable friend will know, the discussions that have already, negotiations have already taken place on that. But what we're also clear about is the importance of linking the withdrawal agreement to the future relationship, such that we cannot find ourselves in a limbo situation, and that we are able to see that future relationship committed to by the European Union and put in place, as I say, I want to see put in place on the 1st of January 2021.
Pat McFadden.
Mr. Speaker, this issue of the Irish border is a direct result of the willful dismissal of its importance before the referendum campaign and the willful disregard of its importance by leading Brexit advocates since the referendum took place. They now advocate a Canada-style free trade agreement. Will the Prime Minister confirm that one of the reasons that she rejects a Canada-style agreement as being completely unsuitable for the UK is not only because of the huge economic damage it would do to industries dependent on multinational supply chains, but also because it would result in a hard border which would break commitments that this country has made?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that, of course, what we have seen from the European Union is that a Canada-style deal is not actually available or be on offer for the whole of the United Kingdom. It's only on offer for Great Britain, with Northern Ireland actually effectively carved out from the rest of the United Kingdom. But certainly the proposals that the government has put forward following the discussions that the Cabinet had in July at Chequers are focused on a free trade deal with frictionless trade at its heart. And of course a Canada deal does not deliver on frictionless trade and therefore does not deliver the absolute guarantee of no hard border between Northern Ireland or Ireland, or indeed frictionless trade at our other borders.
Nicky Morgan.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is right to say that a negotiated deal is the best outcome for the United Kingdom. She's also right to say that protecting the Union is of fundamental importance to members on all sides of the Brexit debate on these benches. But as we just heard from my right honourable friend, the member for Wokingham, there are people who disagree with her statement where she says it would leave us with a no-deal outcome that no one wants. There are people in this House, on these benches, who want a no-deal outcome. The member is nodding. Can I say to the Prime Minister, the people in this country are now really concerned and worried about a no-deal. Businesses, EU citizens living here, British citizens living in the EU. Can I urge the Prime Minister to make sure we do not slip into any kind of no-deal scenario, because this House, I believe, will not support it and therefore would have to step into the negotiations.
Can I say to my right honourable friend, as I said earlier in response to a question, I am clear that we are working to get a good deal for the whole of the United Kingdom. But it is also right that we continue our preparations for no deal, because we do not know what the outcome of those negotiations will be. And I think it is right that we ensure that the deal that we bring back is a good deal for the whole of the United Kingdom.
Liz Kendall.
Does the Prime Minister stand by the commitment made by the Brexit Secretary to this House last week that the government will publish a specific end date to the Irish backstop as part of the withdrawal agreement?
As I've said earlier, both in my statement and in response to other questions, one of the issues that we are discussing with the European Union remains this issue of ensuring that there is the backstop has a temporary arrangement, and that we cannot be kept in a permanent relationship of that sort with the European Union. The backstop is intended there as an insurance policy for the people of Northern Ireland. I don't want that backstop ever to be put in place. I want to ensure we negotiate a future relationship that can start at the end of the implementation period.
Sir Peter Bottomley.
After the referendum, the large majority of MPs across the House were elected to help this country negotiate a future which is outside the EU, with trade arrangements which are sensible and which allow us to use our control over money, borders and the like in a way that is beneficial to us and beneficial to others. Can my right honourable friend assure our negotiating partners that less friction is better than more friction?
Yes, can I say to my honourable friend that precisely because we believe in the value of frictionless trade, that we have put forward a proposal that would indeed deliver on frictionless trade.
Ben Bradshaw.
Mr. Speaker, it must be obvious to the Prime Minister that there's no majority in this place for a hard or no deal Brexit, and she can't do the sensible thing on customs union and single market because half her party in the DUP won't let her. So is she never tempted by the suggestion of her honourable friend, the member for Broxtowe, that the way out of this mess for her and for the country will be a people's vote?
No. I'm going to repeat again what I have said in response to the right honourable gentleman. The people had a vote in 2016. It was in a referendum. This Parliament gave the people that vote, and the people voted to leave, and that's what we will deliver.
Justine Greening.
Whether leave or remain, we can all agree that in the past Britain may have pooled its sovereignty, but we've never just given it away. Does the Prime Minister accept that the Common Rule Book represents a unique loss of sovereignty for Britain, but that for the first time we will have tied the hands of future generations to be bound by rules that they will have had no chance to write?
No, I'm afraid I don't agree with my right honourable friend on that definition that he set out, precisely because the proposal that we have put forward involves a parliamentary lock, and it will be this Parliament that will decide on those rules, whether we adopt those rules and whether we adopt any further changes to those rules.
Mr. Christopher Leslie.
The Prime Minister's problem that she's dancing to the tune of the hard Brexiteers, the duo from Uxbridge and Somerset, and that we shouldn't therefore be surprised that she's taking the country towards an inferior, low-grade, hard Brexit FTA deal. Will she give an undertaking that when this House, when members of Parliament look at that deal and decide actually it isn't right for the country, and that if we decide a different course, she will respect the decision of members of Parliament to put this question to a people's vote?
The right honourable gentleman will know full well that it is very clearly set out what the process would be, what the procedure would be, were it to be the case that this government were to bring a proposal back to this House and the meaningful vote was not to support that particular proposal.
Mr. Patterson.
Speaker, what are the cross-border transactions between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland which so threaten the integrity of the European single market and customs union that they cannot be resolved by existing techniques, existing processes, under existing law, none of which require hard infrastructure on the border?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that there are arrangements that in relation to customs checks that would be put in place were it not the case that we had come to an agreement to have a customs arrangement that did not require those checks to take place. Now, I have seen and have heard of a number of proposals for technical solutions to deal with those issues. I have to say to my right honourable friend, some of those technical solutions effectively involve moving the border, and it would still be a border. Some involve equipment which could come under attack, and some involve a degree of state surveillance which, frankly, I think would not be acceptable in Northern Ireland.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's reported today that the Prime Minister wants the meaningful vote to take place on the 27th of November. The 27th of November is the same day as the European Court of Justice will hear the Scottish Court's referral on the question of whether Article 50 can be unilaterally revoked. My question for the Prime Minister is she afraid of MPs knowing the answer to that question before we have the meaningful vote?
First of all, the honourable lady is making an assumption about the date of the meaningful vote, and of course we're still in negotiations. And secondly, no, because the point about the Article 50 and whether or not Article 50 can be withdrawn, revoked, is that this government will not be revoking Article 50. We're going to keep Article 50.
Mr. Damien Green.
The government was clearly right to reject that part of the Commission's proposals that would have threatened the integrity of the United Kingdom, but it's salutary that what the European Commission produced was a deal that would have been worse than no deal. Despite that, can my right honourable friend assure me and the House that she will continue to work very hard to make sure that we get a deal, because I believe that apart from a relatively small number of people who genuinely believe that no deal would be a good thing for this country, and apart from a few people who would vote against a deal for purely partisan reasons, there is an enormous majority in this House for a negotiated settlement to this procedure.
Well, I can give my right honourable friend that assurance. We will continue to work for a good deal, because I believe a good deal is the best outcome for the people of the United Kingdom.
Angela Eagle.
Mr. Speaker, the DUP who sustain the Prime Minister in office have made it clear that they think no deal is almost inevitable. What does she think?
We continue to work for a good deal for the whole of the United Kingdom.
Mr. Dominic Grieve.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish my right honourable friend every good thing in this negotiation. But I do point out to her that we are heading towards a conclusion where we are going to be in a at least two-year relationship with the EU, which is a condition of vassalage because we have absolutely no say in the rule-making, but we are tied to it. And then, in fact, we're going to be bound by a common rule book afterwards, even if she's successful. And I have to say to her that in those circumstances, I will not be able to support the government in this unless this matter is put to the British people again. It's entirely different from what was discussed and negotiated during the referendum in 2016.
Can I say gently to my right honourable friend, I think I recall the time when he was in favour of the government negotiating an implementation period for our withdrawal from the European Union to bridge that point between our leaving on the 29th of March 2019 and the point at which the future relationship would come into place. We have set out the reasons why I think it is important for us to ensure that at the heart of our future relationship is a free trade deal which has frictionless trade at its heart. That is a good trade deal for the United Kingdom, but which also enables us to undertake good trade deals with others around the world.
Emma Little-Pengelly.
Can the Prime Minister give a firm commitment that nothing will be agreed with the European Union that would exclude Northern Ireland from any part of any future UK trade deals?
We will be negotiating trade deals in the future. In the future relationship, we will be negotiating trade deals on behalf of the whole of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend made the excellent point that it would be unlawful to have a separate customs arrangement for Northern Ireland. Why did that point escape the negotiators until so late in the process?
Can I say to my honourable friend that the point about the not having a customs border down the Irish Sea is not a point that has escaped negotiators. We've been very clear. We were clear when the proposal was first published by the European Union back earlier this year, and we have consistently been clear that such an arrangement was one that the UK government could not accept.
George Howarth.
The existence of a backstop serve only to illustrate the fact that the Prime Minister has actually wasted the last 2 years.
Absolutely right.
No.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Employees in the car manufacturing, pharmaceuticals and food and drink manufacturing sector in Edinburgh want to manufacture to a single rule book with frictionless trade. Can the Prime Minister confirm this remains her negotiating position?
Yes, we continue to negotiate on the basis that the best deal for the future is one which has frictionless trade at its heart. That will be good for businesses here, good for jobs and livelihoods here, but will also be a deal that will deliver on the vote of the British people.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the trouble being caused to the Prime Minister by a relatively small number of members of this House, doesn't she now regret not seeking cross-party consent to her negotiating objective?
Can I say, we have a very clear negotiating objective in relation to the deal that we're getting from the European Union. Sadly, what I see from the Labour Party front bench is not a consistent approach in relation to that. This government has set out our approach in Lancaster House and has followed that through at every stage of these negotiations.
Stephen Crabb.
Speaker, when it comes to signing the political declaration on the future relationship, would my right honourable friend confirm that that declaration will be clear, it will be specific and it will be binding so that business does have more certainty and that we don't just begin another period of Brexit fog and uncertainty?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that and this is precisely why we want to ensure that there is a proper linkage between the withdrawal agreement and the future relationship, so that certainty can be given about what the future relationship is and that is going to come into place. And I think that's what this House will want to see as well when it comes to look at the meaningful vote.
Stella Creasy.
Speaker, the Prime Minister has chastised Labour's 6 tests. Let's look at the one that she has set, which is that frictionless trade must be the condition for signing up to the withdrawal agreement. 2.5 years on, all the whiz-bang technology that you like and a temporary customs arrangement later shows that only staying in the customs union can do that. So in meeting her own test, the same challenge the Prime Minister will face that she faces now, is it friction with the ERG or the future of the people of Northern Ireland that matters more? Because her refusal to let the British public sort this out through a final say deal shows it's not the country.
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, as I have said to others, the British people made their decision on us leaving the European Union, and if she wants to know how to deliver frictionless trade, read the White Paper.
Greg Hands.
Speaker, I'm delighted my right honourable friend has rejected the proposal opposite to be in a customs union with the EU, which was of course rejected by this House only in July. Apart from the most important reason about having our tariffs and trade policy determined by Brussels without us having a seat at the table, it would also mean we'd have no control over trade defences, about dumping, unfair trade practices, have no control over trade preferences for the developing world. Will she therefore agree with me that it would be illogical to agree to be in a customs union with the European Union beyond December 2020?
Well, can I first of all commend my right honourable friend for the work that he did on our trade policy when he was a trade minister. Can I say to him that I absolutely want to see that we're able to put those new trade arrangements into place at the end of the implementation period. I want to see that future relationship coming into play at that point, which of course would be the 1st of January 2021.
Tom Brake.
Does the Prime Minister accept that the best interests of the country are not served by a gaggle of self-serving cabinet ministers threatening to resign, but they would be by allowing the people a vote in a people's vote?
Look, I am quite happy to repeat what I have said in answer to all of those members of this House who have proposed a people's vote. We had a people's vote, it was called the referendum, and the people voted to leave.
Sir Nicholas Soame.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Prime Minister's statement and the progress that has been made, but would my right honourable friend make clear that throughout the tangle of these incredibly complex and difficult negotiations, security cooperation must remain a national priority? And will she confirm unequivocally that this will be the case?
Can I say I'm very happy to give that reassurance to my right honourable friend, and I'm pleased to say that we are making good progress in our discussions with the European Union on both internal and external security matters.
Emma Reynolds.
The Prime Minister has clearly ruled out a Canadian-style free trade agreement, and as she rightly says, such an agreement would not lead to frictionless trade and indeed would be disastrous for our food, automotive and aerospace industries, amongst others. But can she explain how she will guarantee jobs in these industries and deliver frictionless trade if the UK leaves the customs union? And will these customs arrangements be detailed in the political declaration that we will have to vote on?
Good point. The Honourable Lady wants to know how we would deliver frictionless trade in the circumstances. Read the White Paper.
Sir Oliver Heald.
Prime Minister spoke about the need to take a cool and calculated approach to the negotiations, and that really everything that's been achieved so far in the negotiations has been a result of that approach. But does she agree with me that To have the sort of free trade that we want, it must be frictionless, or as frictionless as possible, with the EU, so that our manufacturers can continue to have those very important businesses and all the jobs that go with them. And with that in mind, I hope she'll send our Brexit Secretary, the Right Honourable Member for Esher, over the Channel as often as possible to achieve the result we want, which is a good deal for Britain.
Can I say to my right honourable friend that, like him, I think I absolutely agree with the importance of the point about frictionless trade, because what we want to see in the future is a United Kingdom that is not only able to have good trade deals around the rest of the world, but also has a very good trading relationship with its near neighbours in Europe, and is able to continue, though, that manufacturers here are able to continue to operate on the basis that they have done so far.
Liz McInnes.
Could the Prime Minister update the House about the progress being made about the other border between the UK and the EU, the border between Gibraltar and Spain?
Yes, I'm happy to say to the Honourable Lady that discussions are continuing with, in relation to the matter, because this will be, of course, part of the withdrawal agreement that we will look to enter into, and there have been positive and constructive negotiations taking place, but they are still in progress.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has always said that the United Kingdom will leave the EU on the 29th of March next year, and any agreement will be based on ending the free movement of people, not sending billions and billions of pounds to the EU each and every year, making our own laws in our own country, judged by our own judges. Does she still believe that that is possible?
Yes.
Mike Gapes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Good Friday Agreement took months of intensive negotiation and then was agreed by simultaneous referenda by overwhelming majorities in both Northern Ireland and the Republic. The position as regards the 2016 referendum was that it was a narrow majority on an advisory referendum. Which does the Prime Minister think is more important?
Good point. Can I say to the honourable gentleman that I think that both of these are important. That's why what the government is doing as we negotiate the terms on which we're leaving the European Union and the terms of our future relationship, that's why we're very clear that we remain fully committed to the Belfast Agreement.
Heidi Allen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I don't wish to labour the point, but just like my right honourable friend, the member for Loughborough, my businesses and constituents in South Cambridge are terrified of a no deal too. If that comes to pass, and the Prime Minister will not entertain an extension of Article 50, but accepts the reality that there is no way no deal will pass through this House, I ask with the greatest respect, what option does that leave us other than going back to the people? What else can we do?
To my honourable friend, she's making a number of assumptions in the question that she has asked. And she's made a number of assumptions in the questions that she has asked. We are working to get a good deal with the European Union. If it were the case that at the end of this, at the end of the negotiation process, actually it was a no deal, that was both sides agreed that the no deal was there, then actually that would come back to this House, and then we would see what position this House would take in the circumstances of the time.
Very interesting. Mr. Stephen Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister keeps advising honourable members that if they want to know how to keep frictionless trade, they should just read the White Paper. But surely the Salzburg summit taught her that the White Paper is completely and utterly dead in the water. What is her plan B?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that that is not the case? We have been negotiating with the European Union on the structure and the scope of the future relationship, and we have been doing that on the basis of the proposals that we put forward in the White Paper.
Mark Harper.
Mr. Speaker, in trying to come up with a constructive solution forward, can I ask my right honourable friend to remind the EU what they actually signed up for in last December's joint report? They signed up for unfettered access for Northern Ireland's businesses to the whole of the rest of the United Kingdom. They also signed up to her commitment to follow only those rules that were necessary for that North-South cooperation? Perhaps if she reminded them of what they've signed up to, we might make some progress.
Say to my right honourable friend that he does indeed make a very good point. That was a joint report, and it was very clear the basis on which we were looking to ensure that we avoided a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Stephen Timms.
Mr. Speaker, some people in the House who've been supporting the government seem to think the solution is to have a hard border in Northern Ireland but not to enforce it. Isn't that prospect just a myth?
The government is committed to ensuring that we have no hard border between Northern Ireland, and that's what we're working for.
Mr. David Jones.
Will my right honourable friend confirm that when she meets her EU counterparts later this week, she will tell them that although we're a patient people, our patience is not inexhaustible, and that if they continue to maintain their present negotiating stance of seeking to divide the United Kingdom internally, we will have to assume that they're not serious about achieving a negotiating settlement, and we will therefore be obliged to prepare for no deal.
Say to my right honourable friend that we are all operating on a timetable. We're going to leave the European Union on the 29th of March next year. We are clear that in order to get legislation through this House, there is a timetable we need to follow, and therefore need to come to an end of these negotiations to match that timetable. And I have said, I'm very clear, the government is very clear, that we cannot accept a situation where we would see Northern Ireland effectively divided away from the rest of the United Kingdom.
Wes Streeting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, there's been a people's vote since the last referendum, which was the general election. And at that election, the public sent her a clear message that there is no majority for a hard Brexit in the country. So given that, and given that she was told very clearly that there is no majority in this House for Chequers and the White Paper, why does she expect Labour MPs to ride to her rescue and vote through a hard Brexit that would cost people's jobs in our constituencies and the country at large?
There has indeed been a general election since the referendum. Over 80% of the members of this House stood on a manifesto to deliver on the vote of the people to leave the EU.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Were it to become necessary to implement a backstop agreement, subsequent ending of that arrangement must be a matter for the British government, mustn't it?
If it were necessary for a backstop agreement to take place, as I said in my statement, we want to ensure that we as a British government are able to ensure that backstop arrangement is indeed temporary and does not become permanent.
Catherine McKinnell.
Prime Minister, it's been suggested that the Brexit Secretary has promised the Prime Minister that he will deliver Chequers, whilst at the same time assuring the ERG that he will stop it. Could the Prime Minister confirm that this couldn't possibly be the case, and she has full confidence in her Secretary of State?
Yes, I do have absolute full confidence in my Secretary of State. The government has been negotiating with the European Union. We're doing it on the basis of the White Paper, and that continues.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next spring, when the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are having their first baby, I want this country to be at a time of economic stability. A no deal is unpredictable. So can I encourage my right honourable friend to continue pressing the case for innovative customs solutions that deliver the frictionless trade, whilst listening closely to the concerns of other EU member states about the risks that they face, because it is only when we make progress on finding the long-term solution will the difficulties of the backstop disperse.
Mr. Speaker, this gives me an opportunity to say, as I'm sure was said earlier in the House, but to give my personal congratulations to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex on the great news that we heard today. And can I assure my honourable friend that absolutely it is concentrating on the long-term solution that will deliver not only the good economic future for this partnership with the European Union for this country, but will also ensure that we deliver on our commitment to the people of Northern Ireland.
Peter Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the referendum and since, the people running Britain's businesses were promised repeatedly they would enjoy the exact same benefits as they currently enjoy once we leave the EU. after 2 years of negotiation, it is patently clear they will not. Does the Prime Minister empathise, understand why they want to have a say themselves on the deal and decide for themselves whether it is fit for British business?
To the honourable gentleman that we have indeed been listening to British business. We have put forward a proposal for frictionless trade and a free trade area between the United Kingdom and the European Union, which would deliver for British business and would meet their concerns.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
Michel Barnier very helpfully said that the border he envisages down the middle of the Irish Sea would be heavily reliant on innovative technical solutions. If that is true, why is he so dismissive of the same solutions approved and endorsed by the European Parliament in respect of the land border on the island of Ireland?
Can I say to my honourable friend, as I said earlier, there are a number of comments that have been made about these issues around the border and the possibility of technical solutions. We have been very clear with the European Union, including obviously with Michel Barnier, that any suggestion that there is a customs border down the Irish Sea is one that this government cannot accept.
Albert Owen.
The Republic of Ireland is the main trading link with the United Kingdom through the port of Holyhead in my constituency. For the last 18 months, I've been raising this issue with the Prime Minister. Businesses are worried because contingency plans have been undertaken by Irish companies to go direct to the European continent. What in this statement assurances can the Prime Minister give businesses in my community that that won't happen?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that we continue to be negotiating in relation to our future economic partnership. We have put forward proposals that would enable that frictionless trade to continue to take place across the sea between his constituents and Ireland, and we continue to work on those, and we're making good progress on that future relationship.
Mrs. Anne Main.
Speaker, I absolutely heartily welcome the Prime Minister giving us firm assurances that any backstop will be temporary, because businesses who wish to trade outside the EU would like to plan for that event and need to have, in my opinion, an idea of how long this would last. So can I ask the Prime Minister as well, if she is not prepared to put in a date, how we can actually shore up the fact that nothing can derail the temporary nature that she wishes to see happen? And also, could I ask her to update the House on the futures for British citizens in the EU during this temporary period?
Can I say to my honourable friend, as I have said in relation to others, that we're very clear that this should be temporary. When we publish the proposals in relation to the customs backstop, the UK-wide customs backstop, as I've said earlier, we put in the expectation that that should be that should end by December 2021, because the future economic relationship should be in place at that point. We are also clear that we cannot be in a position where we would be potentially trapped into a permanent backstop. Precisely for a number of reasons, but precisely one of those, of course, is because we do want to be able to negotiate those trade deals around the rest of the world and get the economic advantage for this country of doing so.
Chris Bryant.
This question again because I've not had an answer from the four different ministers I've asked it to. After the 29th of March, which queue will British passport holders use when they land in Spain, France, Germany or Greece? And which queue will EU citizens use when they arrive in the UK?
Well, can I say to the right honourable gentleman that in relation, obviously the Home Office is looking at the arrangements that will take place at the border after the 29th of March 2019. As to those arrangements for UK citizens entering other countries within the European Union, of course those are a matter for those countries. One of the issues that we have put forward in the White Paper and will discuss with the European Union, is precisely ensuring that for those who wish to travel as tourists, for example, between the United Kingdom and the 27 member states of the European Union, they're able to be able to continue to do that as easily as possible in the future.
Richard Drax.
There are no hardcore Brexiteers on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker. Only those who want to honour the referendum and do the best for their country. My right honourable friend, would you agree with me that it's now a question of trust? the backstop, there is deep unease that somehow we will be left in the EU indefinitely. Can I ask her again that if we have to fall back on a backstop, that the United Kingdom has the sole right to pull out of it?
Can I say to my honourable friend, the point about the backstop is that it is, as I said, an insurance policy for the people of Northern Ireland. What I am clear about is, first of all, that it must be temporary, and secondly, that we must be able to ensure that there is no way in which we can be left within that backstop as a result of a decision that the European Union takes in relation to this issue. That there's a concern, I know, that somehow this will be an arrangement in which they don't negotiate the future economic partnership, future relationship, and therefore we're left in this limbo. This is why it's so important that we get a number of things, not least the linkage between the withdrawal agreement and the future relationship, but that also in the withdrawal agreement we get that reassurance about the temporary nature of this backstop.
Jonathan Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are many of us who genuinely accept the referendum result and want the Prime Minister to agree a good deal, but we're also realists and we accept that there will be trade-offs, Prime Minister, to the different deals on option. And the problem with repeating today your belief that the Prime Minister's belief that we're somehow going to agree the Chequers proposals is surely that the EU have clearly said they will never agree to it. The Conservative Party have then said they would never vote for it if it was agreed. But crucially, it doesn't resolve the big issue of substance, which is the ability to unilaterally agree free trade deals really worth the loss to the UK of frictionless supply chains and manufacturing, market access for financial services, and even more importantly, the risk to future stability and peace in Northern Ireland?
Yeah. Can I say to the honourable gentleman that the proposals that have been put forward that form the basis on which we're having discussions with the European Union precisely address the issues that he has raised in relation to frictionless trade and in relation to ensuring that we maintain our commitments to the Belfast Agreement and maintain our commitments that there should be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Dr. Sarah Wollaston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here's some Brexit reality. AstraZeneca have just announced this afternoon that they're stopping investing in the United Kingdom. We're just 165 days to go until we leave the European Union. And we still have no deal, with disastrous consequences. The Prime Minister says that we can't have a people's vote, but isn't the truth here that the people weren't able to see, there is no consensus about which of the many versions of Brexit that we will be heading down? Once we know that final deal, wouldn't it be reasonable to go back to the British people, present them with what's involved, what the consequences are, both positive and negative, and then allow them to give their informed consent to moving forward?
I say to my honourable friend, and I'm sorry because I have obviously answered this question on a number of occasions before this afternoon, in relation to what I believe is imperative for members of Parliament across this House to deliver on the decision that we freely gave to the people of the United Kingdom and to deliver on the vote that they took in relation to leaving the European Union. And of course, my honourable friend references the fact that there is no deal yet, but we are continuing to work for that deal, and we continue in those negotiations and look forward to continuing to work with the Member States of the European Union and the European Commission towards that end.
Geraint Davis.
Mr. Speaker, in 2015, David Cameron was elected on a promise of a referendum on the EU, but promised to stay in the single market. Given that the current Prime Minister has decided to break that latter promise, and given the other promises that have been broken since 2016, not those written on, at least those written on red buses, doesn't she agree that this mandate about the single market and the customs union fundamentally undermines the integrity of Britain and Northern Ireland, and this should ultimately resolve not by a simple choice between a bad deal and no deal, but at the option of a remaining in the EU through a people's vote of the people so they can look again?
I think the honourable gentleman will know that I've answered the question about a people's vote on a number of occasions already. I refer him to my previous answers.
Charlie Elphick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My understanding, and I believe the understanding of the whole House, is that the £39 billion divorce bill is predicated on us leaving the implementation period at the end of December 2020. can she confirm to the House that if matters continue onwards up to December 2021, will that be included in the divorce settlement, or will it be extra?
Prime Minister.
The arrangement that I think my honourable friend has been referring to is whether or not the backstop would be in place up to December 2021. And of course that is a different arrangement from the implementation period, and it has different aspects to it from the arrangements that will be in place during the implementation period. So, but I repeat what I have said on a number of occasions, that what I want to do, and what I believe others want to do, is to work to ensure that we don't have to have that period of time when a backstop is in place, when we are able to see our future relationship come in place at the end of the implementation period, so we have that seamless transition.
Thangam Debonair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this country is a divided country, which was both a cause and a consequence of the referendum 2 years ago. So I ask, what is the Prime Minister's vision for uniting the country so that my constituents who voted 4 out of 5 to remain, as well as those who voted to leave, can feel that there is something we can all truly unite behind, because I don't see it.
Yeah. First of all, we're working to get a good deal that would deliver for the whole of the United Kingdom, but I would say to the Honourable Lady, as I did to one of her honourable friends earlier, just to remind that actually people who are sitting in this chamber, the vast majority of people sitting in this chamber, were elected on a mandate to actually deliver on the vote of the British people.
Roger Gale.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend has rightly said that she seeks a resolution on behalf of all of the people of the United Kingdom and all citizens. More than 1 million of those live in other countries of the European Union. Others will wish to leave or need to leave to live in other countries. Is she going to protect their interests, please?
Can I say to my honourable friend that, of course, when we were negotiating the citizens' rights element of the December joint report, I was asked in this House on many occasions to give a unilateral declaration of the rights of EU citizens here in the UK, which I refused to do until we could negotiate a reciprocal arrangements for United Kingdom citizens living in the remaining member states of the European Union. Now, in some of those member states, the precise technical details of those reciprocal arrangements are still being worked through, but that was part of the citizens' rights agreement that we came to in the December joint report.
Mr. Graham P. Jones.
The European Parliament, or the EU 27, or this Parliament votes against any deal she brings forward, Prime Minister brings forward, what next?
As I have said earlier, this House has set out clearly what the process would be were it the case that on the meaningful vote, the position that the government set forward was not agreed to by this House.
Steve Double.
Will the Prime Minister commit that the interests of our fishermen will be considered in any agreement with the EU, and that she will ensure that the full benefit of leaving the EU will be available to our fishermen when we leave?
I can give my honourable friend that assurance. We are absolutely clear. We're coming out of the CFP, and we will be an independent coastal state, and we will be able to decide and negotiate who has access to our waters.
Martin Whitfield.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has ruled out putting a date on the backstop. Can she also rule out an indefinite backstop with a notice period?
Notice period. I'm very clear that we're not going to have an indefinite backstop, that we will ensure that the backstop is a temporary arrangement. As I said in my statement, the third point I said was, while I do not believe this will be the case, if the EU were not to cooperate on our future relationship, we must be able to ensure that we cannot be kept in this backstop arrangement indefinitely. I could not expect this House to agree to a deal unless we have the reassurance that the UK as a sovereign nation has this say over our arrangements with the EU.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, during Saturday's excellent victory by Gloucester Rugby against the French League champions Castres Olympique, several representatives of medium and small businesses focused on telling me how disastrous no deal would be both for them and their European partners' trade. Can I therefore encourage my right honourable friend and the Secretary of State to highlight for EU officials that the huge risks of unintended consequences from failing to reach a sensible agreement with us on the Irish border
would be much greater than has hitherto been highlighted.
I say to my honourable friend that we do continue to work for that good deal that I know he and others want us to be able to agree with the European Union. And obviously we remain committed in relation to the hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and we will continue to continue to make the point to the European Union that the integrity of the United Kingdom is of importance to us, is of key importance to us, and we cannot accept anything that would challenge that integrity of the United Kingdom. And congratulations to Gloucester Rugby Club.
Ben Lake.
Recent government figures show a 7% increase in Welsh exports to the EU, and that the EU single market accounts for 61% of total exports from Wales. Given the importance of both the single market and the customs union to the Welsh economy, what representations has she received from the First Minister of Wales in relation to her policy of leaving both?
I talked to the First Minister of Wales, and my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, has spoken to Welsh Minister and Scottish Minister today to update them on where we are. We keep in regular contact with both the Scottish and Welsh governments on these matters.
Alberto Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister made a very welcome statement following Salzburg that in the event of no deal, the rights of all lawfully resident EU nationals in this country, like my parents and other family members, would be guaranteed. Can she take this opportunity this afternoon to repeat that statement in this House for the benefit of all MPs to understand clearly that it's a Conservative government that will protect the rights of EU nationals?
Yes, can I say to my honourable friend, I'm very happy to repeat that commitment to protect those rights of EU nationals in the event of no deal. I hope we will see reciprocal arrangement, were that no deal to be the case, from the member states of the European Union for UK citizens.
Paul Sweeney.
I never thought I would see the day where her Secretary of State for Scotland and the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth Davidson, were being prayed in aid by the DUP in support of their arguments on the backstop. But will the Prime Minister not confirm that the only way a backstop will function is if in effect it undertakes the same function as a single market and a customs union on that border? That only way that will be functional, and that will be the only way it will succeed. And will she stop pandering to the reactionary nationalists of our ex-Foreign Secretary and his cohort?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that if he wants to see the details of the proposal that we put forward on the customs arrangement for the... Oh, we've heard that, says. I think if the honourable lady waits, there might be a slightly different answer to the one she thinks I'm about to give. If the honourable gentleman wants to see the arrangements for the customs aspect, the UK-wide customs proposal that we put forward in response to the EU's suggestion of a customs border down the Irish Sea, he should look at the paper that we published in June.
Simon Clark.
So far today, my right honourable friend has failed to reassure the House that we will definitely be able to leave the backstop by the 31st of December 2020. She continues to argue for a common rule book that many of us on these benches will not be able to support. Will she not pivot to a Super Canada policy and focus the negotiating time that remains on the technical solutions that are being set out? I urge her to do so, please, before it is too late.
Can I say to my honourable friend, he's raised a number of issues. I have been clear in this House that what we have, one of the areas where we are continuing to discuss with the European Union in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol, precisely because of our concerns around this issue, is this question of the temporary nature of the backstop and ensuring that we have the means to ensure that that backstop is temporary were it ever to come in place. In relation to the Common Rule Book, it would be, there would be a parliamentary lock-in on that issue. These are rules which our manufacturers tell us they would be abiding by in any case, regardless of whether or not there was that lock, but we would have that parliamentary lock. And the offer that was on the table from the European Union in relation to the Canada-style free trade agreement was one that only related to Great Britain and essentially carved Northern Ireland away from the rest of the United Kingdom in relation to these matters.
Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
It's an indisputable fact that a majority of members of this House voted to trigger Article 50. Indisputable, if it is regrettable. Can Parliament overturn that decision?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that it is an indisputable fact that the majority of members of this House actually voted to trigger Article 50, and it is also an indisputable fact that this government has no intention of revoking Article 50.
Matt Warman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People may not have listened or liked what they heard, but is it not the case that not a single argument has been made since the referendum that wasn't made before the referendum? And as such, we should make sure that anyone who is a Democrat should reject a second vote.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. There are many issues that have been raised in this House as if they were not discussed during the referendum, but actually there was a very full debate during the referendum process on the issues about remaining in or leaving the European Union, and I believe it is a matter of faith in our democracy and in the integrity of politicians that we deliver on that vote.
Jamie Perkins.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister appears to be heading towards a deal that enjoys the support of almost nobody. She is saying to the Brextremists that they need to vote for her deal because otherwise Brexit will collapse. She's saying to more moderate voices that they need to back her deal, otherwise there's going to be no deal. Isn't the truth that neither of those positions are actually true?
I say to the honourable gentleman, we're working for a good deal. We'll bring that deal back and there'll be a vote in this House of Commons.
That's what they've got, I think.
Simon Hall.
Mr. Speaker, as we approach this crucial phase, I'm absolutely convinced that my constituents in North Dorset want to be assured of this one thing, that my right honourable friend is not negotiating in her interests, in the interests of our party, but quite properly, as a sensible Prime Minister, in the interests of the country, our people and our businesses. Can she confirm that that is the case?
Very happy to confirm that. I believe it is absolutely important that I and this government put the national interest first in these negotiations. That's exactly what we're doing.
Dr. Ripahak.
The Minister luckily made it back okay from the continent yesterday, but my son's school trip letter about Berlin in June has warns, in case of a no-deal Brexit, the projected price may rise due to the pound sterling's rate relative to the euro, and there may be additional fees for visas to incur, not to mention the whole Open Skies agreement, what will happen to the plane if that's not renewed. If Elthorne School is not prepared to take at face value the whole it'll be all right on the night line that we keep being fed, surely Project Fear is fast becoming Project Reality.
We are working for a good deal, but it is absolutely right that the government, as it has done, for example, through the publication of technical notices and through the work it is doing for those matters that are responsibility of government, prepare for the possibility of no deal. The European Union is preparing for the possibility of no deal, but we are both sides working to ensure we get a deal.
Kevin Foster.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for North East Somerset brought some more tourists to my constituency on Saturday at a rally. Obviously, tourism is a very large business for Torbay. What thoughts is the Prime Minister having about continuing the trade of tourism after we leave the European Union?
My honourable friend raises an important area. There are many sectors that we need to consider when we're looking at our future relationship, and tourism is one of those. One of the key issues, of course, which I've referred to already in this chamber this afternoon, is the question of ensuring that tourists can move across the border as easily as possible, and preferably as easily as they can today, so that there is no further encumbrance on those tourists who want to come and visit my honourable friend's very beautiful constituency.
Anna McMorrin.
Thank you. Despite her protestations, it's becoming increasingly clear that the Prime Minister is unable to hold her party together, let alone the country. And there is no doubt about it. I know that my constituents did not vote to become poorer, and that is what will happen if she proceeds along this route. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and give the people the final say on the deal?
I refer the honourable lady to the answer I have given previously.
Jeremy Lefroy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Talk of no deal is now commonplace, but the hard reality is that it will be very damaging to the people of the UK and the EU, and indeed to our future relationship. Would my right honourable friend agree that it's incumbent on both sides to strain every sinew to avoid no deal?
I agree with my honourable friend. I think it's important for both sides to be working as hard as we can to get a good deal. As I've always said, I think a deal that is good for the UK will also be a deal that's good for the EU.
Alex Sobel.
I didn't realise until today that the Prime Minister was an Eagles fan. In her announcement, she put the backstop could be as long as 2021. She has put
Hotel California.
the country into Hotel California that we can check out any time we like, but we can't leave. When is she going to put workers, businesses and consumers first, and at the very least look at a customs union between the United Kingdom and the EU?
We are putting the interests of people across the United Kingdom, workers, consumers, businesses, at the forefront of what we're doing, which is precisely why we've put proposals forward for a free trade area which includes frictionless trade.
James Cartledge.
I entirely recognise the strong potential economic upside of being able to negotiate our own free trade deals. But surely we need to remember that the very same firms who we would expect to invest into and benefit from those trade deals would be hit hard if we had friction at our border, disrupting supply chains. Surely we have to get it right on both counts.
Yes, what we want is to ensure that we've got a good trade relationship with the European Union in the future, and we've put forward the proposal with frictionless trade at its heart, but that we also get the benefit of those great trade deals around the rest of the world.
Lloyd Russell Moyle.
The Prime Minister has come here today and failed to really outline how her backstop is going to meet the ERG and DUP impossible conditions, and really she's just going to act as the fall guy for them, isn't she? Why doesn't she put herself out of her contortionist misery and put this question to a general election or a third referendum with Remain as an option?
Immensely stimulating to listen to the honourable gentleman from Poole and I think Mid-Dorset, but it's even more interesting to listen to the Prime Minister's answer. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not quite sure where a third referendum came in relation to this issue, but I think my answer is that I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I have given previously.
Chris Phil.
Mr. Speaker, the European Union's negotiating position in relation to the Irish backstop appears to imply the only way they can believe we can avoid a hard border is by maintaining a customs union. Does the Prime Minister join with me in rejecting that premise, and that there are two ways one could avoid it? One is outlined in the White Paper in July, and the second, in relation to the customs union, is evident by studying the Swiss-French border, which of course crosses the customs union. I know there's different arrangements on the single market, where there is pretty much no infrastructure on most A roads, barring a little French sign and a single camera of a kind seen on most high streets.
Say to my honourable friend that I do believe that there is a way to ensure that we avoid that hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. It is by having an arrangement with the European Union, which is frictionless trade, which is a customs arrangement, which is not us being part of a customs union.
Paul Masterton.
No sooner were rumours circulating of a differentiated deal for Northern Ireland at the weekend than the Scottish Government wanted in on the act, wanting the same bespoke deal to apply to them, even though that would have caused a hard border at Berwick. So is the Prime Minister absolutely clear that any new differences that are needed to make a frictionless border in Northern Ireland, beyond what already exists on an all-Ireland basis, will apply UK-wide, and we will leave together with one deal?
We are indeed working for a deal which ensures that we leave the European Union as the whole United Kingdom. Of course, the circumstances of Northern Ireland having a land border with a country that will remain within the European Union are different from those at Scotland. There are, of course, already some checks that take place, for example, in relation to livestock moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And I can't really believe that the Scottish Government or the SNP actually want to impose those checks on livestock that would be moving from Scotland into Northern England.
Trudy Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can my right honourable friend confirm that her plans mean that we will leave the Common Agricultural Policy?
Yes.
Yeah. Mark Menzies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has got an excellent record in standing up for the interests of Britain's defence workers, especially 6,000 Eurofighter workers at Walton in my constituency. Can the Prime Minister impress upon our European counterparts the importance of doing a deal, because there are hundreds of thousands of jobs across Europe that are at risk if they do not come to a table with my right honourable friend?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very important point. When we talk about the importance of frictionless trade, often the sector that is referred to is the automotive sector, but the aerospace industry also has a very real interest in that frictionless trade, and we will continue to make the point about the importance of that frictionless trade.
Will Quince. Mr. Speaker, will my right honourable friend reconfirm that she would reject any plans or deal that would break up the United Kingdom or threaten our precious union?
Indeed, I'm happy to give that commitment, and that is precisely why we have been clear about that we cannot accept the proposals that the European Union has put forward that would, in effect, mean a customs border down the Irish Sea, which would effectively break Northern Ireland away from the rest of the United Kingdom.
Nigel Huddleston.
Speaker, does the Prime Minister agree that compromise on both sides, whether in politics, in business or in any human relationship, does not mean giving in, giving up, being humiliated, but it's a perfectly sensible and reasonable route to getting a mutually beneficial and desirable outcome?
Yes, by definition, negotiations mean both sides sitting down, talking about the issues and coming to an agreement that both can accept. And very often that does mean both sides having to accept some degree of compromise.
Mr. Chalk, you seem to be losing your appetite. I hope not. Mr. Alex Chalk.
It's just because, Mr. Speaker, the question was asked so artfully before. I don't want to repeat myself, but shall I repeat it? May I repeat it, Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
My right honourable friend has made clear that there is an impasse over the Northern Ireland backstop, but is she confident that with a constructive approach and goodwill on both sides, it remains possible, and indeed it must be possible, to cut the Gordian knot?
Yes, can I reassure my honourable friend, I do believe it is possible for us to come to an agreement that meets our requirements, and I believe it is possible for us to achieve the good deal that we want to see for the United Kingdom.
Mr. Stephen Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I've heard very clearly the Prime Minister state and restate that our precious union is not up for negotiation. But will she rule out any increase in checks on trade flowing between Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
What we've put forward in relation to the backstop proposal is a mixture of a UK-wide and Northern Ireland-specific proposal, which meets the constitutional settlement that we have for Northern Ireland. As we've already recognised, there are, of course, a limited number of checks that already take place. What we want to ensure, as I said earlier, is that businesses in Northern Ireland are able to have that free and unfettered access to the rest of the United Kingdom internal market, and indeed, in the backstop arrangement, have that unfettered access to the European Union as well.
Thank you. Order. Statement. The Minister of State for Energy and Clean Growth. Minister Claire Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to make a statement to this House. As the Prime Minister said earlier this year, the international determination to address climate change and deliver a cleaner future is one of the facts of our time and one of our greatest opportunities. Only this month we had a reminder of the importance and urgency of our mission in the form of the publication of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's latest special report. The report's conclusions are stark and sober. It showed that we are not on track to cap global average temperature rises to below 2 degrees from pre-industrial levels, let alone to reach 1.5 degrees. And the implications of this difference and this warning are spelt out in the science, from flooding risk going up to fisheries going down, extreme weather events, extinctions due to loss of habitat, serious, challenging, difficult outcomes. To mitigate against the impact of climate change, we need to understand how to best transform our energy generation, land use, transport systems, industrial processes, homes and buildings. And that's why earlier today I officially requested the advice of our UK independent advisers, the Committee on Climate Change, on the implications of the Paris Agreement and this latest IPCC report for the UK's long-term emissions reduction target. Mr. Speaker, we are the first major industrial economy to seek such advice, which again reaffirms our determination to lead the world in this area. I have asked for this advice on when and how we could achieve a net zero target for our economy, including whether this is the right time to set such a target and how reductions might be achieved across sectors in the most cost-effective way. This request was the first event in our very first Green Great Britain Week, designed to bring together businesses, government and civil society to celebrate the extensive cuts in emissions we've achieved in the UK, but to also open up the discussion about the challenges and opportunities for cleaner growth. The week involves tens of partner organisations, over hundreds of events and thousands of participants right across the UK. And Mr. Speaker, no other country other than the UK has done more to prove that action on climate change and economic growth can go hand in hand. Since 1990, we have led the G7 group of countries in cutting emissions, but also in growing our economy. Since 2000, according to a recent report, the UK has cut emissions per unit of economic growth. I know it's a bit